Hi, my name is Gwen and I'm here at Klose Knit sitting in front of one of the walls of needles this afternoon, and we wanted to share a video with any new knitters out there who might be thinking about their first hat project. We know a lot of people started knitting during the pandemic, which is super, and we have a few recommendations as far as a yarn and some patterns that you might think about as you get started knitting your first hat. So I'll start right away with the yarn. The yarn we'd like to recommend is Rios, Malabrigo Rios. This is a worsted weight 100% merino wool yarn, which means it's quite soft. It's very soft. It will feel good in a hat. And one of the nice things about this yarn is that it is superwash. So that means if you or the person that you give the hat to throws it in the washing machine, the hat should survive without shrinking or felting. One of the other great things about this yarn is it comes in really beautiful colors. So some solids, semi-solids, as well as some more even variegated colorways. So you'll probably find one here at the store that you'd like to knit either for yourself or for a gift for somebody. So if you are a new knitter, you might be thinking, how do I knit with this log of yarn? Well, there are a few things that you should know about knitting with a skein of yarn like this versus a center pole ball. And the first is there are really two ways of getting this into the form that you can knit with. You can use a swift and ball winder, which are two pieces of equipment that you'll probably want to pick up eventually, and if you're interested you can check those out at the store the next time that you're in. But you can also wind this by hand, and it's pretty easy. The only thing that you need to know, and I'll use this one as an example, what you'll do is you'll unwrap the yarn, so just pull the end out from the loop of the other end, and you'll see that you have a big loop of yarn. You will cut all of these little ties that are holding the skein together, as well as find the two ends of the yarn, and they happen to be right here on this one. They are tied together. So I would just cut that. Now the most important thing that I wanted to make sure that you're aware of is you will want to keep some tension on this loop. You will end up with a ton of tangles if you just start pulling yarn off of the loop. It will be kind of a mess. So if you don't have a ball winder and a swift at home, what you can do is have somebody hold the loop of yarn like this while you wind your ball. You can put it around the arms of a chair if you happen to have one at home that has the right spacing. I have a rocking chair that works pretty well. Or the other thing that you can do, and this is a little more casual but it works for me, is I like to sit cross-legged, and then I put one loop over one knee, one over the other, and just sit cross-legged on the sofa and wind a ball that way. That works pretty well. So that is Rios. So you'll need 3 different needles to make most hat patterns. Ribbing is often done using a needle size that is 1 or 2 sizes smaller than the size that you use for the main body of the hat. And it's just the way ribbing is. It just makes it a little tighter and a little nicer if you use a smaller size needle for that. So you'll see that in most patterns, that it calls for 2 sizes of circular needles. In addition, you'll also need double pointed needles like these to use when you get up here at the top, because you're going to have so few stitches that they won't stretch around your 16-inch circular needle. So double pointed needles, and then 2 sizes of 16-inch circular needles for most hat patterns. 16 inches refers to the length of the needle, and this is really the best size to use for a hat. If you think about it, most adult heads are somewhere between or around 20 inches to maybe 22, 23 inches around. Mine is 23 and a half, 24. I have a big head. So if you knit a tube that has a 20-inch circumference or a 22-inch circumference, if you knit that on a needle that is itself 24 inches long, that doesn't really give you any extra room for moving the stitches around, and it's going to be pretty uncomfortable to knit. So you're going to be much happier if you use a 16-inch circular needle. So now that we've talked about the yarn and knitting needles, let's talk about patterns. We have 3 patterns that we think would look great in the Rios that we'd like to recommend. The first is actually one of Klose Knit's own patterns called the Architect's Hat. And both of these sample hats were knit using that pattern. It just comes in one size, and the pattern as written has a deeper ribbing section, which is a nice detail. before you get to the body of the hat. This hat, also knit using the Architect's hat pattern. What Brigitte did here was she cast on with a contrasting color, knit a shorter amount of ribbing before going into the rest of the hat. So you can find that, like I said, on Ravelry and if you search for Architect's hat. Two other pattern options that would be wonderful in Rios are Barley by Tin Can Knits. That's a hat pattern that is also available as a free pattern on Ravelry. And there are two great things about that pattern for new knitters. The first is that it comes in multiple sizes, so baby to adult. So you'll be able to find a size that fits either your head or the person's head that you're knitting for. And it also has a garter stitch band on the side of it, which is kind of a nice detail. The pattern itself has many good links to technique descriptions too. So if you find yourself stuck on a pattern instruction, it's pretty easy to figure out what it means. The third pattern that would look really nice in Rios is a pattern called Turn a Square by Jared Flood. It's a hat pattern that has the same basic parts, ribbing, body of the hat, and then decreases at the top. But the decreases are done a bit differently, and the body of the hat is striped. So the pattern gives you instructions for how to knit stripes. So that's another great option. So one other thing we wanted to talk about is I think it's very common for people to end up with a hat that isn't quite the size that they expected when they started knitting. And if that happens to you, you have a few different options. The first is that you can think about the gauge that you're getting. So gauge refers to the number of stitches per inch, usually measured out over 4 inches for most patterns, maybe over an inch. And you can check and see whether or not you got the gauge that the pattern is asking for, or if you're getting something that's close. The other thing that you can think about as you're knitting is whether or not you like the fabric that you're getting using that size needle and the yarn that you're using. So those are really the two factors to think about when you're deciding whether or not to keep going with the size needle that you selected. You can always knit a little gauge swatch, so just cast on a few stitches with a needle and knit back and forth and see if you like the fabric that comes out. But a hat is a small enough project that it's very tempting, and really it's not a bad idea at all to just cast on, knit the hat, and then evaluate either halfway through the project or at the end of the project. Is this a hat that seems like it's going to fit you? Is it a hat that seems like it's about the right size to fit the person that you mean it for? If it's not, or if you don't like the quality of the fabric that you're getting, if it's too loose and airy, or if it seems really dense, if you've accidentally knitted something that would be more like armor than a cozy woolen accessory, then you can always rip back, adjust your needle size accordingly, and knit the thing again. One thing I will say is if you end up with a hat that's just a little bit off, you might consider whether or not you have a slouchy hat. Maybe you just have a hat that's a little bit looser than the beanie that you were shooting for. Likewise, if you end up with something that's just a little bit small, you might try washing it first. So using wool wash and some nice tepid water to swish it around, because what will often happen is the yarn will kind of relax, and you might find that you have a hat that works for you after all. So just two little tips there. So we wish you happy hat knitting. If you would like to do shopping in person and come in and pick up some Rios, the store is open Tuesdays through Friday, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. and on Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So just wear a mask and come on by. You're also able to shop online if you go to the store website, klosekniturbana.com. Finally, we'd like to invite anybody watching to join the new Facebook group called Boneyard Knitting Group. It is a private group, but all are welcome to join, and that's another place where you can post pictures of your projects or maybe ask a question or two and get some feedback. Finally, if there's anything that you would like to ask a question about with this video, please feel free to do so below in the comments, and we'll try to answer it in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.